Hello everyone, welcome to Jennifer's Sewing and Crochet. Today I'm going to show you how to make a Granny Square Afghan block. This video is for my adopted sister Trish. She asked me if I could do a little refresher video on Granny Squares. Okay. To start off, I printed this pattern out from this book. This is the Crochet Book Bible. The pattern didn't really show up so great on video, so I printed it out so it would be a little bit easier for you to see, or I actually typed it out. This pattern requires a J hook, which is a 5.5 millimeter hook. And the brand of hooks that I use, this is an H hook, and it is a 5.0 millimeter. You can use whatever hook size you prefer. That will give you a gauge of a finished square between 3.5 to 4.5 inches square. My square using the H hook finished at a 4-inch hook. I'm sorry, a 4-inch square. Just be sure to make all of your squares with the hook that you started, so you get the accurate gauge for each square. With that in mind, let's get started. Okay, you are going to start off by making a slip knot onto your hook. Like so. Then you're going to do your foundation ring, which is a chain 4, and they're going to join a slip stitch to form a ring. So chain 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then in the 4th chain, you're going to slip your hook inside, yarn over, and pull through both loops. And you will have a little ring, and sometimes you do have to kind of like separate it there a little to get your opening in your ring. A chain 4 ring is pretty tight. Okay, with that in mind, our round 1, we are going to chain 5, which counts as your first chain, and a chain 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then you are going to 3DC into your ring, chain 2 for a total of 3 times. Okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to crochet right over your tail piece, so you do not have to worry about weaving it in. So yarn over, insert your hook into the center of the ring. Yarn over. For your first DC. And that helps you open your ring a little bit after you get the first stitch inside there. So continue on. 2, 3. There's your first 3DC. Yarn 2. I'm sorry, chain 2. Keep working over the tail. Oops. there's your second one. Chain 2, continue on to the third. Chain 2. Okay, so that is your 3DC chain 2 3 times. And now what you're going to do is you're going to 2DC into your ring, join with a slip stitch to the third chain of your beginning 5 chain. Okay, so chain, oops, excuse me, DC 2. Okay, so now you will slip stitch into the third chain. So here's 1, 2, and 3 right here. You'll see your third chain. So you're going to insert your hook. Make sure you get it through both loops of the chain. Sometimes it can be a little difficult. Okay, there we go. We have it inside the third chain. Yarn over and pull, oops, pull through. And that is your first round 1 of your granny square. So now what you're going to want to do is just flip it over, and your chain, you're going to, or your tail, excuse me, and you're just going to clip the piece right off. Okay. So now if you're going to be changing your colors, you're going to want to fasten this round off, which you would pull this loop, this tail, you'll clip it and you'll just pull it through, and that's just fastening it off. And you will join a new color with a slip stitch into any chain 2 section. Okay. We're not going to be changing colors, so we're just going to continue on to round 2, which you will again chain 5, which counts as your first DC, and chain 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Then you're going to DC into your base of chain 5. You're going to 3DC into the chain 2 space. Okay? So 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And that is your chain 5, which is your first DC, 2 chains included, 3 DC in this base of the chain 5. Then, to continue on, you are going to chain 1. You're going to skip these 3 DC, and you are going to 3 DC, chain 2, 3 DC, all into this next chain 2 space. Okay. Then chain 2, 3 DC, Okay, and there is your chain 1, 3DC, chain 2, 3DC, all into your first chain 2 space. So you're going to do that for a total of 3 times. So 1, 2, and 3. Continue on. Chain 1, 3DC, 2 chain, 3DC into chain 2 space. So chain 2, continue with the final 3DC in the chain 2 space. Continue chain 1, 3DC, chain 2 into the last chain 2 space. Chain 2. Your final 3DC into your chain 2. Okay, and then chain 1. Now there is your chain 5, which includes as your first DC, chain 2, you 3DC into the first space next to your chain 5, chain 1, 3DC, chain 2, 3DC for a total of 3 times, so 1, 2, and 3. And then for the final step of round 2, you are going to chain 2, and then you are going to join with a slip stitch to the 3rd chain of your beginning chain 5. Okay. So you did your chain 1, 2 DC, and you're going to work in this space right here. Okay. So sometimes that first stitch can be a little, make sure you do it tight enough so you don't have a really loose, a loose DC there. Okay, like so. I could have done that a little tighter, but that's okay. Okay, so there's your 2 DC. And then you're going to slip stitch into the 3rd chain of your beginning 5. So 1, 2, and 3, just like you did on round 1. And I can't get this in there. Sometimes if you can't get your stitch, your chain open, I like to take a little hook and put it into the chain just so I can get both loops of that chain. And then I just kind of like twirl my hook in there a little bit just to kind of like open up that chain a little. And then remove the hook, and you're able to put your hook into there a little easier. And it's making me look like a liar. Well, phooey. Okay, there we go. So that's your hook into the 3rd chain, and you're going to slip stitch to complete row 2 or round 2. And there is round 2 complete. And you can see your chain 2 spaces in each corner. To continue on to round 3, you're going to slip stitch into the first, like so. Oops. Slip stitch. You're just going to put your hook into the chain 2. You're going to yarn over and pull that loop through, and that is your chain space. And that's just moving your stitch over enough into that chain 2 space to complete your stitches. Okay? And you're going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So, and of course, it counts as your 3D, or your first DC, and chain 2. So again, you are going to 3DC in the space at the chain 5. One, 2, and 3. And then you are going to chain 1, and you're going to skip 3DC, and then you're going to 3DC in the next chain 1 space. And how you do that is you do your chain 1, skip these 3DC, and in the chain 1 space, you're going to 3DC, or 3 double crochet. So, one, oops, 2, 3. I think I remember why I don't use this cotton, this brand of cotton yarn. It tends to separate as you're working with it a little. Okay, so there is your chain 5, which is the first DC, 2 chain, 3 DC into chain 5 space at the base, chain 1, 3 DC into the first chain 1 space. Then you're going to continue on by chaining 1 again, and you're going to skip that. Okay, so chain 1, skip 3 DC, then you're going to 3 DC, chain 2, 3 DC in to your corner chain 2 space. Lost my space in the, lost my spot in the pattern there for a second. 2, 3, then chain 2, 3 DC, okay, and then you're going to continue on for a total. You're going to start at the star of the pattern. So you'll see your little star in the pattern. And what that star means is from the star, you're going to repeat the steps from the star to this star 2 more times. Okay? So chain 1, skip 3 DC, 3 DC into your chain 1 space. Oops. Chain 1, 3DC, chain 2, 3DC into your chain 2 space. Two DC. I'm sorry, 2 chain, then 3DC. Okay, and there's for your second. And then you're going to repeat one more time. So chain 1, skip 3, 3DC into chain 1 space. The stitch kind of separated a little there on me. And there's the 3DC, chain 1, 3DC, chain 2, 3DC into the next chain 2 space. Chain 2. Oops. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to chain 1 and you're going to skip the 3DC, and then you're going to 3DC into the last chain 1 space. So chain 1, 3DC into the chain 1 space. Okay, for the 3DC. Then you're going to chain 1, and you are going to do 2DC into the space right next to the chain 5, and that is right there again. So 2DC. Oops, didn't get it all the way through there. There we go. There we go. Okay, and then you are going to again slip stitch into the top or into the 3rd chain of the 5 chain. Okay, so you have it into the 3rd chain, slip stitch, pull through, and there is your row or round 3 complete. And again, if you want to change colors, you're going to fasten off and then join your new yarn with a slip stitch to any chain 2 space. Okay, and again, we're not going to change colors, so we are going to continue on with the 4th and final round. I'm so used to saying row. So you're going to chain 5, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 again. Again, you are going to chain 3 at the base of the chain 5. I'm sorry. You are going to DC 3 into the base of the chain 5. So one, 2, and 3. Okay, so there's your chain 5, which counts as your first DC, and the chain 2, 3 DC in the base of the chain 5. And now what you're going to do is you are going to chain 1. You can see in the pattern that you have another star. So you're going to work chain 1, skip 3 DC, 3 DC into the next chain 1 space for 2 times. Okay? So chain 1. Here's your first chain 1 space. So 3 DC. 1, 2, and 3. Chain 1, 3 DC into the next chain 1 space for the second time. Two, and 3. Okay, so there is your chain 1, 3 DC into the next chain 1 space for 2 repeats. Okay, so now what you're going to do is you're going to chain 1, skip 3 DC, then again 3 DC, chain 2, 3 DC into your chain 2 space. And you will do that from star to star for a total of 2 more times. Okay? Continue. Chain 2, 3 DC, okay, and you're going to repeat 2 more times. Okay, so there's your 3 DC, chain 2, 3 DC. You're going to you're going to chain 1, 3 DC, chain 1, 3 DC into the next chain 1 spaces. Okay, and then the next one, chain 1 into the next chain 1 space, 3 DC, 2, okay, and then you're going to chain 1, 3 DC, chain 2, 3 DC into your next chain 2 space. Okay, and you're going to again chain 1, 3DC into the chain 1 space, chain 1 again, and 3DC into the next chain 1 space. Chain 1, 3DC into the next chain 1. And again, you're going to chain 1, 3DC, chain 2, 3DC into the next chain 2 space. When I first started using this cotton yarn, I really liked it, but the more I work with it, I'm discovering I don't like it at all. Okay, and then chain 2. DC. Okay, and then again, you are going to chain 1, 3DC into the first chain 1 space, chain 1 again, and 3DC into the last chain 1 space. So chain 1, 3DC, oops. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like this cotton yarn. It separates the strands easily. It might work for you, might not. I'm just learning that I don't like working with it. Okay. Now chain 1, DC 3 times into the last chain 1 space. Okay, and now you're going to again chain 1, and then you are going to chain 1, 2 DC in to the final space next to your chain 5. So you're going to chain 1, 2 DC, slip stitch into the third chain of the chain 5. Okay, and then you are going to do your slip stitch right into that third chain. So your hook is into your third chain, slip stitch right through, and that is the completion of round 4 and your granny square block. You're going to cut your end, leave a long tail for weaving, and then you're just going, while your loop is still on your hook, you're just going to pull it through and fasten off. Tighten it a little, and there is your granny square. And let's see if it finished off to 4 inches like the first square. And there we go. It finished off to 4 inches just like our first square. So you'd be able to join your squares together. Okay. If you have any questions, please comment down in the box below. At the end of the video, I always have a photo tutorial so you can look at each step, each round and each stitch step by step. If you have any questions, like I said, please leave them down below in the comment section. Please like and subscribe to my video. On my next video, we are going to move away from crochet and we will be doing some sewing, and it is a really big surprise, so please stay tuned for that. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.